At 16, the highlight of my year was our school's homecoming. Beyond the game, there were clothes to buy, haircuts to get, and parties to attend. That day started with a mix of excitement and anticipation. My friend and I went shopping, and then realized our usual barber had a last-minute emergency. In the search for an alternative, my friend suggested his uncle. Trusting my friend, I agreed. Arriving at the uncle's apartment, the place seemed unusually empty, just a folding chair in the living area. Soon he led me to a guest room. There, a police badge, handcuffs, and a gun caught my eye. Initially, I assumed they were props for some role play, but he casually mentioned that he was a detective. Strangely, I felt reassured. However, things took a bizarre turn. I noticed a tripod and camera setup in his bedroom. When questioned, he laughed it off, hinting at some explicit, adult fun. Later, I accidentally stumbled upon a friend recording himself for this supposed woman the uncle had mentioned. My gut told me something was off, but the badge and gun weighed heavily on my decision to stay silent. I tried to brush the situation off and returned to getting my hair cut. Soon after, my friends left for food, leaving me alone with the detective. My nerves heightened as he became increasingly inappropriate. He noticed my discomfort, but instead of backing off, he ushered me into the bathroom, offering to shave my legs. I felt trapped, cornered by someone I was supposed to trust. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse, he insinuated a more intimate shave. My heart raced. Suddenly, the loud knocking of my friends at the door interrupted the tension. Relief washed over me. The detective, perhaps sensing my distress, quickly finished my haircut, acting as if nothing happened. I feigned composure, making a quick excuse to leave. On the drive home, the silence between me and my friend's nephew was deafening. The weight of what had occurred hung between us. Though I moved away, the experience stayed with me, a constant reminder that sometimes those in positions of authority can betray our trust. Always be vigilant and trust your gut. Note: if this story is based on true events, it's important to ensure your well-being. If you ever feel comfortable, consider talking to someone you trust about it. If it's fictional, it's a compelling reminder of the importance of being wary and trusting one's instincts. The vast untouched landscape of South Texas has always fascinated me. The endless horizons and the near-desert conditions, interspersed with patches of civilization, provided endless opportunities for a freelance photographer like me. It was a seemingly serene backdrop to a region with an underbelly of conflict, cartels, and cross-border tussles. It started as a typical Tuesday morning. I had driven down to the southern tip of Texas for a photography project. The changing hues of the sky, old ranches, and wildflowers formed the perfect tableau for a photo essay I was working on. By late afternoon, I found myself close to the border town of McAllen. An old, dilapidated barn on the outskirts caught my attention. Situated against the setting sun, it promised an exquisite shot. Eagerly, I set up my tripod, waiting for the perfect light. Lost in the world of apertures and shutter speeds, the quiet purr of an approaching engine barely registered. It wasn't until I lowered my camera and saw a black SUV, windows tinted to an intimidating shade, that my heart started its uneasy thud. Two men stepped out. Jeans, plain t-shirts, but there was something unsettling about their demeanor. Their eyes, dark and assessing, settled on me. "You lost?" the taller of the two inquired, his voice smooth but with a chilling undertone, heavily accented. "Just capturing the sunset," I replied, striving for casualness, nodding towards my camera. The other, shorter but more built, looked at the barn, then back at me. "You know, this is private property." He stated it as a fact, not a question. Flustered, I replied, "I'm sorry, I didn't see any signs." The taller one smirked. "You think a sign's gonna stop anyone here?" Before I could respond, the shorter one pointed to my backpack. "What's in there?" "Just my gear," I stammered. He took a step closer, the threat palpable. "Open it." I complied, revealing lenses, spare batteries, and a half-eaten sandwich. He grunted in acknowledgement, then said, "Too close to the border, amigo. People might think you're here for more than just photos." The implied threat hung in the air, I had heard about the cartels and their iron grip over these parts. The last thing I wanted was to be mistaken for an undercover agent or someone snooping around. "I'll pack up and leave immediately," I offered. The taller one surprisingly chuckled. "Take your photo, then leave." He looked at his watch. "You have 5 minutes." Relief washed over me. I quickly adjusted the settings, snapped a few shots, and packed up. As I reached my car, the shorter one called out, "Don't come back here, and if you captured anything out of the ordinary, it'd be best for you to delete it." There was no mistaking the warning. I nodded vigorously, jumping into my car and speeding away. The adrenaline made my hands shake and the gravity of the situation began to sink in. They hadn't physically harmed me, but the threat was clear. I could have been another statistic, another missing person in a vast, lawless land. Hours later, safely ensconced in my motel room, I reviewed the day's shots. Among the beautiful sunsets and landscapes was one unintentional shot. The black SUV, license plate visible, parked beside the barn. Debating for a long while, I finally decided to send the photo anonymously to the local police. Not only for my safety, but for others who might innocently wander into the wrong territory. Days later, as I wrapped up my project and headed home, a local news story broke. A major cartel operation had been busted. The report stated an anonymous tip had led authorities to the location. I can't say for sure if my photo made a difference, but the near miss was a stark reminder that even in the quest for beauty, danger lurks. The landscapes of South Texas remain enchanting, but they also hold secrets, some menacing, waiting just beneath the serene surface. The dense Belizean rainforest is not for the faint-hearted. I had been hiking for days, a solo expedition, to document the myriad of species that this lush, wild paradise housed. My days consisted of waking up to the song of exotic birds, navigating through thick undergrowth, and setting up camp beneath the sprawling canopy. One evening, after a long day of trekking, I decided to set up camp near a burbling creek. Its melody, combined with the chirps and croaks of the nocturnal rainforest dwellers, felt peaceful. As the sun sank, casting a purple hue over the sky, I cooked a meager meal and settled into my tent. Sleep came easy, but it was short-lived. I was jolted awake by a rustling sound just outside my tent. At first, I thought it might be a curious coati or maybe even an ocelot. But the guttural low growl that followed was unmistakable, a jaguar. Heart pounding, I remembered reading that jaguars were ambush predators, unlikely to attack if they felt they'd been seen. I slowly unzipped a small portion of my tent, trying to catch a glimpse without startling it. There it was, its powerful frame silhouetted by the moonlight, its eyes reflecting a piercing yellow. It sniffed my campsite, likely intrigued by the scent of my meal. I reached for my flashlight and the emergency whistle around my neck. Shining the flashlight directly into its eyes, I blew the whistle with all the breath I could muster. The jaguar, startled by the sudden onslaught of light and sound, retreated a few steps, but didn't flee. It stared directly at me, calculating. Knowing I couldn't stay in the tent forever, I made a bold move. I emerged, flashlight aimed at the jaguar, and started yelling, trying to make myself look bigger and more intimidating. It seemed to work, as the jaguar slowly backed away. But instead of fleeing, it started to circle the campsite, never breaking eye contact. The thrill of fear was potent. I knew I needed to get to higher ground. Jaguars are adept climbers, but I hoped the act of climbing might deter it. Spotting a sturdy-looking tree, I started my ascent. Branch by branch, I pushed upwards, flashlight clenched between my teeth, the jaguar's growls echoing below. After what felt like hours but was probably mere minutes, I found a thick branch and settled there. The jaguar, frustrated, circled the tree for a while before disappearing into the undergrowth. Relief washed over me, but I knew I was far from safe. Climbing down wasn't an option. I had to wait for daylight. The hours stretched infinitely, every sound magnifying in the silence of the night. My only company was the distant hoot of an owl, and the rhythmic chirping of crickets. As dawn broke, its first rays illuminating the forest, I scanned the ground below. No sign of the jaguar, but I knew better than to underestimate it. Waiting a while longer, hunger and thirst urging me to descend, I carefully started my descent. Once on the ground, I packed up swiftly, ensuring I left no trace behind. My intended route was abandoned. Now, my only mission was to get back to the nearest ranger station. Every rustle, every shadow seemed threatening. My senses were on high alert. After hours of walking, I spotted a familiar trail marker, relief flooding me once again. I wasn't far from the ranger station. Reaching the station was an indescribable feeling. Safety, at last. I relayed my harrowing experience to the rangers, who weren't entirely surprised. Jaguars, they said, were curious creatures, especially younger ones still testing boundaries. Grateful to have come out of the encounter unscathed, I decided to cut my expedition short. The rainforest, with all its beauty, was also a brutal reminder of the raw, untamed power of nature. In the subsequent days, as I made my way back to civilization, the encounter replayed in my mind. The predatory gaze of the jaguar, the intense game of survival, and the profound respect it instilled in me for the wild. It was a stark lesson. In nature, we are but visitors, and the real masters of the wild always watch from the shadows. The school hallways always echoed with the chatter of students, the rhythmic clanging of lockers and the scuffing of sneakers. But for my mom, Linda, they echoed with something more ominous. Mom was an English teacher at my high school. Being in the same school had its pros and cons. While it was comforting to see her during the day, her presence also meant I couldn't skip classes or get away with too much mischief. Amidst our small school staff was Mr. Rodney, the janitor. At first glance, he was just another member of the school's ecosystem, someone who cleaned up after everyone and ensured the school was in tip-top shape. But over time, I started noticing something odd. Mr. Rodney seemed to be around Mom a lot. At first, I thought it was coincidental. Maybe Mom often spilled her coffee. But the pattern grew hard to ignore. She'd be in the teacher's lounge, and he'd be there, wiping the same spot on the counter repeatedly. In the evenings when Mom stayed late to grade papers, I'd peek down the hallway to see him mopping the same stretch of floor outside her classroom. One evening, Mom confided in me. "Mr. Rodney's behavior has been a bit odd lately." I hesitated before replying. "I've noticed. He's around you a lot, isn't he?" She looked away, her concern evident. "He's left notes in my classroom. Nothing overt, just friendly. But given the context, they're unsettling." We decided to be vigilant but not jump to conclusions. However, the incidents escalated. One morning, Mom found a bouquet of roses on her desk with a note, "For the most beautiful teacher." She looked troubled, but what truly alarmed her was that the roses were the same kind. She had mentioned loving during a casual chat with another teacher. I was concerned for her safety. My initial hesitations faded, and I felt it was crucial to alert the principal. With the notes as evidence, we approached Mrs. Jennings, who looked gravely concerned. "I'll handle this immediately," she assured us. Later that week, we found out that Mr. Rodney had been suspended, pending an investigation. Many teachers came forward saying they had noticed his unsettling behavior around Mom, but had dismissed it as harmless. But the sense of relief was short-lived. 2 nights later, as we were having dinner, there was a persistent knock on our door. My heart raced as I looked through the peephole. Mr. Rodney. We called the police, who arrived promptly and arrested him. The subsequent search of his home was chilling. There were pictures of Mom everywhere, in her classroom, at the supermarket, in our backyard. It was clear he had been following her for months. The legal proceedings that followed were a blur. The defense argued that Mr. Rodney was infatuated and meant no harm, but the overwhelming evidence pointed to a dangerous obsession. Thankfully, he was sentenced to a rehabilitation facility with a restraining order against approaching our family. The incident changed our lives forever. Mom decided to take a sabbatical, opting for therapy to cope with the trauma. I became fiercely protective of her, always ensuring she was safe. While the events were harrowing, they brought our community together. Teachers, parents, and even students became more vigilant, ensuring such incidents didn't happen to anyone else. It was a harsh lesson in trust and vigilance, a reminder that danger can lurk even in the most unexpected places. But it also reinforced the idea that when faced with adversity, communities can come together to protect and heal. Growing up in the neatly manicured suburb of Evergreen was a juxtaposition of the life my sister, Katie, and I led inside our seemingly perfect white picket fence house. From the outside, it portrayed every hallmark of a charming family home, but the inside bore witness to our confined existence. Mom and Dad, Ellen and Greg Smith, were the model neighbors. Mom baked pies for newcomers, and Dad mowed our lawn every Saturday. They never missed a PTA meeting, and their smiles never waned. But behind that facade, they were controlling to a point that can only be described as imprisonment. It began subtly. No playdates, no sleepovers. "It's for your safety," Mom would chide. But as the years passed, the controls tightened. Our homeschooling ensured we never left the house. Every window had thick curtains, and the doors were always locked. We weren't allowed in the backyard, and venturing to the front yard was unimaginable. One might wonder why we didn't scream for help or try to run away, but when confinement is all you've known, the outside world becomes an intimidating unknown. Besides, there were the punishments. Any small act of defiance, like sneaking a glance outside, was met with days of being locked in the basement, where cold, damp darkness became another layer of our prison. Katie, 2 years my junior, was my only solace. We whispered dreams of the outside world in the dead of night, making plans of what we'd do if we ever escaped. We'd draw pictures on scrap paper, creating imaginary worlds, and hoping someday we'd get to live in them. One fateful day, as I approached my 16th birthday, I stumbled upon a forgotten relic, a radio. After some fumbling, it came alive, and through the static emerged the mellifluous voice of a DJ from a nearby town. It was a revelation. The music, the banter, the advertisement of local events, it all painted a vivid picture of a world we were missing. Empowered by this new discovery, Katie and I began crafting an escape plan. We noticed Dad kept a set of spare keys in his study. It was a risky endeavor, but I managed to swipe them. Over weeks, we stored non-perishable food and makeshift weapons, preparing for our great escape. The day arrived when our parents announced they would be attending a neighbor's party. "Behave," Mom warned, her gaze sharp. But this was our chance. The moment their car rolled away, Katie and I sprang into action. With trembling hands, I unlocked the front door. The world outside seemed so vast. But we had no time to be mesmerized. We started running, our lungs gasping for free air. We aimed for the house of Mrs. Peterson, an elderly lady 2 doors down. We remembered her kind eyes from our younger days and hoped she'd help. She answered our frantic knocks, her face contorting in shock as she took in our disheveled appearance. Hours later, surrounded by police officers, therapists, and child protection agents, we began unraveling our story. The shock on their faces was evident. How could such a crime occur in peaceful Evergreen? The aftermath was tumultuous. Our parents were arrested, their facade shattering under scrutiny. As for Katie and me, we were placed in foster care, where the journey of healing and understanding the world began. The years that followed were a mixture of therapy, school, and gradual integration into society. Mrs. Peterson became our guardian angel, guiding us through the maze of the outside world. Over time, Katie and I found our place. We enrolled in college, forging careers and relationships. The scars of our past never fully faded but became a testament to our resilience. In our late 20s, we co-authored a memoir shedding light on our experiences. It became a bestseller, sparking conversations about child abuse, the veneers people maintain, and the signs society often overlooks. Using the proceeds, we set up a foundation supporting victims of domestic confinement, turning our trauma into a beacon of hope. It's often said that life's challenges shape us. For Katie and me, our harrowing past molded us into advocates, ensuring no child ever suffers the way we did behind the closed doors of suburban homes.